"You're not supposed to be here," Sophie whispered, her voice barely audible over the hum of the city lights as she pressed against the cold brick wall. The alley was narrow, shadows stretching long and thin under the flickering street lamps, and for a moment, she thought she had imagined the tall figure blocking the exit. Lucas Sterling stepped forward, his coat brushing the wet pavement, eyes scanning the area with an intensity that made her stomach tighten. "I said, stay right there," he said, but there was no anger, only a tense calm that demanded attention. Sophie's pulse raced as she took a careful step back, the rain soaking her hair and the chill creeping into her bones. Every instinct screamed for her to run, yet her feet felt glued to the damp ground. She noticed the subtle flicker in Lucas's expression, a hesitation that suggested a complexity beyond the sharp edges of his public reputation. "Why are you here?" she managed to ask, her voice catching, and he tilted his head slightly, the streetlight glinting off his watch. "Because I can't let you face this alone," he said simply, and the words, though plain, carried weight that pressed against her chest. The alley seemed to shrink around them, the distant sounds of the city fading until it was just the soft patter of rain and the sound of her own breathing. Sophie's mind raced, piecing together fragments of rumors she had heard about him. The man whose name alone could make powerful people flinch, yet here he was, speaking to her, as if she mattered more than the rest of the world. A sudden movement at the edge of her vision made her flinch, but Lucas's steady hand on her shoulder grounded her, firm yet careful, a silent promise of protection. "Trust me," he said again, and this time Sophie allowed herself a small nod, the tension in her body easing slightly as she followed his lead deeper into the alley. They moved quickly, weaving through puddles that reflected the neon signs above, shadows dancing across their faces in rhythm with their steps. Every corner they turned seemed to pulse with potential danger, yet Lucas's presence was a shield, a silent reassurance that no harm would come as long as she stayed close. The city felt both vast and intimate, the night alive with possibilities, and Sophie realized that for the first time in hours, she was not just running. She was moving with purpose, guided by the man whose mere presence shifted the narrative of the evening. As they approached a quieter intersection, Lucas paused, glancing over his shoulder, his gaze sharp and calculating. "Almost there," he murmured, and Sophie caught the slight smile tugging at the corner of his mouth, fleeting but unmistakable. Her heart lifted despite the chill, the unknown still pressing around them. Yet for a moment, the weight of fear lightened. The night was far from over, shadows still waiting to twist around every corner. But Sophie felt a strange clarity, a sense that the events unfolding were larger than chance, and that Lucas Sterling, enigmatic and unwavering, was about to alter everything she thought she knew about the night, the city, and perhaps even herself. "You have no idea what's coming," Sophie whispered, her voice trembling as she paused under the dim glow of the streetlight, the wet pavement reflecting streaks of neon from the city around her. The alley seemed endless, shadows stretching like fingers along the brick walls, and in that moment, every instinct told her to turn and run, yet she couldn't move. A sudden presence shifted the air, and Lucas Sterling stepped forward, tall and composed, eyes sharp and unreadable, scanning the alley with a precision that made her heart skip. "Stay with me," he said, low and steady, but there was an undertone of care that made her chest tighten, a feeling she couldn't name. Sophie's hands trembled as she adjusted the strap of her bag, the rain slicking her hair against her forehead, each drop cold and urgent. Lucas's gaze didn't waver, and she sensed a quiet determination, a silent promise woven into the firmness of his stance. "Why are you here?" she managed, words catching in her throat, but he only tilted his head slightly, letting the light glint off the edge of his coat. "Because I won't let you face this alone," he said, and the simplicity of the sentence carried weight that pressed against the tension building in the alley. Step by careful step, he guided her past puddles reflecting fragmented signs, the city's hum fading to a distant murmur as they moved through shadows that seemed to watch. Each turn brought a new angle, a sense of potential unknown waiting, yet Lucas's presence grounded her, a steadying hand in the storm, a subtle assurance she could cling to. Her mind raced with fragments of what she had heard about him, stories of power, of influence, of a life far removed from hers. Yet here he was, offering her safety, a bridge between worlds she had never imagined touching. The air smelled of rain and asphalt, the distant echoes of late-night traffic punctuating the rhythm of their steps. And with each movement, the tension softened just enough for Sophie to notice the careful humanity in his eyes, a quiet protection. As they neared a narrow cross street, Lucas paused, scanning ahead, and a small, almost imperceptible smile tugged at the corner of his lips, an invitation to trust, to follow, to step into the unknown with him. Sophie's heartbeat synchronized with the pulse of the city, a mix of fear and anticipation filling the spaces between the lights and shadows. And for the first time that evening, she realized that this encounter, fleeting yet charged, had shifted the course of her night, hinting at a journey larger than herself and promising that every step she took with Lucas Sterling would unveil more than danger. It would reveal the possibility of connection, understanding, and an unfolding story that refused to let her simply walk away. The alley opened into a quieter street where the neon lights reflected off puddles, creating streaks of color across the wet pavement, and Sophie followed Lucas Sterling, her steps cautious but determined. He moved with deliberate purpose, each stride confident and measured, guiding her past corners and side streets that seemed familiar to him, yet foreign to her, the city unfolding like a maze in the rain. "Keep your eyes on me," he said, his voice steady, a low hum of reassurance that made her chest tighten in a way she could not explain. She noticed how he scanned every shadow, every doorway, and the way his presence seemed to push back the uncertainty of the night, creating a small bubble where she felt safe enough to breathe. The rain continued to fall, the droplets hitting the pavement in a rhythm that matched the rapid beat of her heart, and Sophie realized she was beginning to trust the unspoken promises in Lucas's steady movements. They paused briefly at the corner of an intersection, the street empty except for the faint hum of distant traffic, and he glanced at her with an intensity that felt both protective and urgent. "Almost there," he murmured, and she nodded, feeling the subtle shift in the night as the city seemed to watch silently. Each step forward revealed glimpses of the world she had never known, the side streets, the small shops, the soft glow of apartment windows above, all forming a tapestry of urban life that was vibrant yet intimate, as if the city itself had taken notice of their movement. Sophie could feel the energy of Lucas around her, a quiet strength that demanded attention without forcing it, guiding her through the uncertainty with a hand that was firm but never overbearing, a presence that offered stability in a night filled with questions. They reached a small courtyard, the rain pooling in shallow reflections, and Lucas paused, his gaze sweeping the area with meticulous care. "We are nearly at a safe place," he said, the words simple but carrying an invisible weight of assurance, and Sophie felt a sense of relief mixed with anticipation, knowing that the journey was not yet complete but that she was not alone in it. The night continued to hum around them, a symphony of distant sirens, muffled voices, and the soft dripping of rain from rooftops. Yet within the quiet space they occupied, there was clarity, a moment of understanding between them that spoke of patience, resilience, and an unspoken bond forming under the urban lights. Sophie drew a deep breath, letting the cool night air fill her lungs, and for the first time, she allowed herself to feel a spark of confidence, a sense that moving forward with Lucas Sterling would reveal truths and possibilities she had not imagined, each step a promise of discovery and the unfolding of a story that was only beginning to reveal its depth. The quiet courtyard opened into a small maze of narrow streets, the neon reflections dancing in the puddles as Sophie followed Lucas Sterling, each step deliberate, measured, and precise. The air smelled faintly of rain and asphalt, crisp and sharp, and Sophie's senses felt heightened, every sound amplified. The distant hum of traffic, a car door slamming somewhere blocks away, the soft flutter of a flag in the wind. Lucas led the way with a calm authority, glancing over his shoulder occasionally, eyes scanning the environment with meticulous attention, ensuring that each corner they turned was safe. "Keep moving, and do not look back," he said, his voice low but steady, carrying a quiet insistence that left no room for hesitation. Sophie felt her chest tighten with a mix of nervous energy and trust, the rhythm of their steps syncing with the pulse of the city, a strange alignment between them she could not explain. As they passed an old bakery, the warm glow from its windows spilled onto the wet street, and for a moment, the world outside their little bubble felt distant, almost peaceful, yet Sophie knew the night was far from over. Lucas stopped briefly near an iron gate, surveying the area before signaling her forward, a subtle gesture that communicated both caution and reassurance. She noticed how he seemed to command the space around him without forcing it, a quiet presence that radiated both control and concern, and she realized she had never encountered anyone like him before. Almost there, he murmured, and Sophie followed, her senses alert to every detail. The texture of the pavement beneath her shoes, the faint echo of footsteps from a distance, the shimmer of rain sliding down window panes. Each movement built a narrative of anticipation, a story of careful navigation through a city that could be both beautiful and unpredictable. Lucas paused at a small park tucked between buildings, the grass slick with rain, the swings gently moving in the wind, and he looked at her with a glance that suggested unspoken understanding. Sophie drew in a deep breath, feeling a mixture of relief and curiosity, aware that the night had shifted into something unfamiliar yet compelling. The lights of nearby apartments glimmered softly above, and she sensed that this brief pause was not just a moment of rest, but a turning point, a subtle acknowledgement that they were both stepping into something larger than the immediate path, a journey defined by trust, observation, and the unspoken connection forming in the quiet between raindrops and streetlights. As they continued, Sophie felt a renewed focus, a sense that following Lucas Sterling through the night would reveal more than the city itself. It would uncover glimpses of resilience, understanding, and the unfolding of a story that demanded attention, patience, and the courage to move forward into the unknown. The streetlight above flickered as Sophie followed Lucas Sterling through the winding lanes, the echoes of their footsteps mingling with the distant hum of the city. Each corner they turned revealed new layers of the urban landscape, narrow passageways opening into small courtyards where the wet pavement shimmered under the neon glow. Lucas moved with a confidence that seemed to command the space around him, his gaze alert, taking in every detail as if he could read the environment like a map etched in memory. "Stay close," he murmured, and Sophie adjusted her pace, feeling the warmth of his presence as a silent reassurance. She noticed the careful way he navigated, pausing at intervals to scan the surroundings, subtle gestures indicating potential obstacles or points of interest that she would have missed. The air was heavy with the scent of rain and asphalt, mingled with the faint aroma of a bakery that still had lights on in the distance, adding a touch of warmth to the cool night. They paused briefly near a small fountain, the water catching the light in gentle ripples, and Sophie allowed herself a moment to breathe, feeling the tension eased just enough to notice the calm determination in Lucas's posture. His eyes met hers for a brief instant, a quiet communication passing between them without words, a bond formed in the shared focus of moving forward safely. As they continued, the city seemed to shift around them, alleys that once felt endless now forming a coherent path guided by Lucas's instincts, each step deliberate, building trust and understanding. The distant murmur of late-night traffic, the soft flutter of leaves in a gentle breeze, the occasional drip of water from a fire escape above, all combined to create a rhythm that synchronized with her racing thoughts, grounding her in the present while heightening her awareness of the unfolding journey. Lucas led her to a quiet plaza, the glow from surrounding buildings casting long shadows, and he stopped, looking around with a practiced eye before signaling her to follow a side path. Sophie felt a subtle exhilaration, an acknowledgement that they were venturing deeper into a part of the city few knew, each movement an exploration of both space and trust. The night air carried a crisp clarity, and Sophie realized that in this shared navigation, she was beginning to see not only the city from a new perspective, but also Lucas in a light that revealed care, vigilance, and an unspoken promise that the path ahead, though uncertain, was one they would face together. Each step forward deepened the sense of anticipation, a feeling that something significant was on the horizon, and Sophie's heartbeat mirrored the rhythm of the city, ready for the story to unfold with every shadow, reflection, and whispered footstep along the rain-slicked streets. The narrow streets opened into a small, quiet square where the glow of street lamps reflected off rain-slicked bricks, and Sophie followed Lucas Sterling closely, her senses alert to every shadow and echo of movement. The city felt alive around them, the distant hum of cars and the faint murmur of voices blending with the soft dripping of water from rooftops, creating a rhythm that matched the rapid beating of her heart. Lucas moved with deliberate care, each step calculated yet fluid, guiding her past corners and narrow alleys with an instinctual precision that seemed almost second nature. "Almost there," he murmured, his voice carrying a quiet assurance that made her pulse steady despite the uncertainty around them. Sophie noticed the way he observed the environment, how he anticipated the smallest obstacles, and how his presence created a protective space that allowed her to navigate the unknown with a sense of confidence she had not felt before. The air was crisp and cool, filled with the scent of wet asphalt and faint hints of food from a nearby open cafe, adding layers to the sensory tapestry of the night. Lucas led her past a small fountain where the water shimmered in the lamplight, and Sophie paused for a fraction of a second, noticing the deliberate calm in his movements, the careful way he extended his hand to help her step over uneven pavement. "Trust me," he said again, and she found herself nodding, the words grounding her as much as his presence did. Each step through the city felt like a lesson in awareness, each turn revealing new textures, sounds, and lights, building a sense of shared understanding between them. The shadows lengthened around the edges of the square, and the reflections in puddles created a fragmented mirror of the world above. Yet Sophie felt a strange clarity, a recognition that following Lucas was more than physical movement. It was an unfolding journey of insight and connection. They paused briefly by a set of iron gates leading to a hidden courtyard, the subtle rustle of leaves above breaking the quiet, and Lucas gestured for her to move ahead carefully. Sophie inhaled deeply, letting the night fill her lungs, and for the first time in hours, she felt a tangible sense of purpose, a recognition that each choice, each step alongside Lucas Sterling, was part of a larger story, one that demanded patience, trust, and an openness to discovery. The night around them remained vibrant yet intimate. Each detail, the glow of distant windows, the soft ripple of water, the interplay of light and shadow, pulling her deeper into the rhythm of the city and the subtle, unspoken bond forming between them, a promise that the path ahead, though still unknown, held a revelation that was only just beginning to emerge. The hidden courtyard opened before them, quiet and dimly lit by scattered lamps that cast soft pools of light on the wet cobblestones, and Sophie followed Lucas Sterling as he led her through the maze of shadows, each step measured, careful, and deliberate. The air carried the faint scent of rain-soaked flowers from nearby planters, mingling with the earthy aroma of damp bricks, creating a sensory map that seemed to slow time itself. Lucas paused at the center of the courtyard, his gaze sweeping across every angle, every shadow, his posture relaxed yet vigilant, the kind of attention that made Sophie feel simultaneously protected and aware. "We are nearly at a place where we can pause," he said, his voice calm, steady, carrying a sense of quiet authority that did not demand but inspired trust. Sophie adjusted the strap of her bag and took a careful step closer, feeling the subtle warmth of his presence, the energy that radiated from him without words. Around them, the city seemed to breathe, the distant hum of traffic fading to a gentle backdrop, punctuated by the occasional drip of water from the rooftops above. Lucas gestured subtly, guiding her through narrow paths between buildings, his movements precise, intuitive, creating a safe corridor where each step built upon the last. The subtle reflections of neon and puddles flickered across her vision, and Sophie realized that the night was revealing layers she had not noticed before, corners of the city that held both beauty and mystery. She noticed the meticulous care in the way he navigated uneven stones, the slight pauses that allowed her to adjust, the way he observed the surroundings with a calm intensity that made her feel seen, considered, and understood. As they approached a small alcove tucked behind a brick wall, Lucas halted and looked at her, his eyes softening, communicating patience and understanding. Sophie drew a deep breath, the cool night air filling her lungs, and felt a sense of cautious anticipation, the knowledge that they were stepping into a space where trust and awareness intertwined. The gentle sway of leaves above and the distant flicker of lights painted patterns on the courtyard walls, creating a canvas of shadows and illumination that seemed alive. With each step, Sophie felt the narrative of the evening deepening, an unspoken story forming between them, built upon observation, movement, and the quiet exchange of focus and care. The city, the night, and Lucas's presence combined into a rhythm she could sense in her chest, each beat a reminder that the journey was ongoing, that every step was deliberate, meaningful, and part of a story unfolding in real time, a story that promised more insight, more discovery, and a shared understanding that extended beyond the immediate path and into the quiet spaces between streetlights, reflections, and whispered motions. The soft glow of lanterns illuminated the hidden courtyard as Sophie followed Lucas Sterling through the narrow passageways, the wet cobblestones beneath their feet reflecting a fractured mosaic of light that seemed to dance with each step. The cool night air carried a hint of fresh rain and distant street scents, mingling with the earthy aroma of damp stone, creating an atmosphere that heightened every sense, every subtle sound, every shift of shadow. "Stay close," he murmured, the words low and steady, a grounding force in the expansive stillness of the night. And Sophie adjusted her pace instinctively, feeling a growing sense of trust intertwined with a cautious curiosity. The courtyard opened briefly to reveal an archway lined with ivy, the leaves glistening under the scattered light, and Lucas gestured for her to step carefully as he led the way, the soft sounds of their movement echoing in the enclosed space. Each corner they turned brought new textures and details to observe, from the intricate patterns in the brickwork to the faint reflections of distant windows and puddles, and Sophie felt a growing awareness of the city as a living backdrop to the unfolding experience. The subtle shifts in air currents and the gentle rustle of leaves overhead created a rhythm, a quiet cadence that aligned with the careful steps of Lucas, each movement purposeful, intentional, guiding her with a blend of assurance and respect. At one point, they paused near a small fountain, the water rippling gently, catching fragments of light that shimmered across the courtyard walls, and Lucas looked at her with a steady gaze that communicated patience, vigilance, and an unspoken acknowledgement of the shared journey. Sophie drew in a slow breath, the cool air filling her lungs, and felt a sense of calm tempered by anticipation, realizing that the steps they had taken together were more than a physical path. They were a bridge toward understanding, awareness, and a developing bond rooted in mutual attention and careful navigation. The distant sounds of the city, muted by the enclosing walls of the courtyard, seemed to underscore the intimacy of the moment, each detail amplified, each reflection and movement a part of a larger narrative that Sophie could sense unfolding in real time. As they continued forward, following the carefully chosen route through the hidden corners of the city, Sophie felt an emerging clarity, an awareness that the night was shaping a story in which every step, every glance, and every breath carried significance, weaving a connection between them that was measured, deliberate, and quietly profound, promising that the journey ahead would reveal layers of insight, understanding, and the delicate interplay of presence and trust. The narrow passageway opened into a small hidden garden tucked between brick buildings, the rain having left the leaves glistening under the soft glow of streetlights, and Sophie followed Lucas Sterling carefully, her footsteps quiet against the wet stone path. The air carried the faint aroma of earth and blooming flowers, mixing with the subtle scent of the city beyond, creating a moment suspended between the vibrancy of urban life and the intimacy of this secluded space. Lucas moved with controlled precision, his eyes scanning the surroundings with a focused attentiveness that allowed Sophie to move with a growing confidence, each step a careful negotiation of space and rhythm. "Keep your attention here," he whispered, and Sophie felt a comforting steadiness in the words, a cadence that matched the soft drip of water from overhead eaves. As they passed an ornate fountain at the center of the garden, the water shimmered under the lamplight, reflecting distorted fragments of their movements, and she noticed the way Lucas observed every angle, every shadow, his gaze steady and deliberate, communicating a silent awareness that invited her to trust in his guidance. The gentle rustling of leaves and the distant murmur of traffic formed a subtle symphony, punctuating the quiet confidence of their steps, and Sophie became aware of the small details, the texture of the stone walls, the soft hum of neon from a nearby street, the subtle play of light and shadow across the path ahead. Lucas paused briefly near a wrought iron gate, tilting his head as if listening to the environment, then gestured for her to continue, his movements fluid yet purposeful, guiding her through the space without urgency, but with clear intention. Sophie's chest rose and fell with measured breaths, her mind attuned to the rhythm of their journey, and she sensed the careful balance of trust forming between them, a silent agreement that each step forward was part of a greater understanding. The courtyard beyond the garden revealed a pathway lined with low stone walls and glimmering puddles, reflecting scattered lights from surrounding buildings, and Sophie realized the night had transformed into a series of discoveries, each movement orchestrated with care and observation. Lucas's presence provided a grounding force, a steadying influence that allowed her to navigate the unfolding environment with increasing clarity, noticing textures, colors, and angles she might have overlooked. As they moved together through the layered spaces of hidden streets and quiet gardens, Sophie felt an emerging sense of purpose, the awareness that the night was weaving a story through observation, attention, and the subtle interplay of trust, presence, and guidance, creating a shared narrative that promised insight, reflection, and the gradual unveiling of the city in a way that was both intimate and expansive, each step echoing with significance in the stillness of the night. The narrow pathway opened onto a small hidden plaza, the soft illumination from scattered lanterns casting warm, golden tones across the wet cobblestones, and Sophie followed Lucas Sterling with a mixture of caution and growing trust, her eyes absorbing every detail of the space around them. The scent of damp earth mingled with the faint aroma of nearby flowers, creating a sensory landscape that heightened her awareness, each step echoing lightly against the stone. Lucas moved with an effortless precision, his gaze sweeping the area with meticulous attention, his presence commanding yet gentle, a steadying force in the stillness of the night. "Stay close and notice your surroundings," he murmured, his voice calm and steady, a quiet instruction that grounded her in the rhythm of the environment. Sophie adjusted her stride to match his, taking in the reflections of streetlights in the puddles, the subtle movements of shadows across walls, and the delicate play of light on the foliage that lined the edges of the plaza. Every turn they took revealed new textures, angles, and depths to the city, guiding her perception toward a careful observation of details she had not previously noticed, building a sense of awareness and connection with the space around them. Lucas paused at a small fountain, its water shimmering under the glow of a nearby lamp, and gestured subtly for her to observe the flow, the patterns reflecting off the surface in fragmented lines. Sophie felt a calm wash over her, the tension easing as she began to understand the deliberate pace and thoughtfulness in Lucas's movements, each action designed to cultivate focus, patience, and an intuitive understanding of the environment. The distant hum of traffic, the soft rustle of leaves in the gentle breeze, and the subtle dripping of water from rooftops combined to form a rhythm that intertwined with the cadence of their steps, creating a shared harmony between them and the city. Lucas looked at her with a steady, composed expression, his eyes conveying reassurance and quiet encouragement, and Sophie felt a burgeoning sense of trust, a realization that moving through the night under his guidance was an exercise in perception, attention, and awareness. As they continued along a narrow path lined with low walls and glistening puddles, Sophie absorbed the subtle shifts of light and shadow, the intricate details of the brickwork, and the faint echoes of the urban landscape, sensing that each observation contributed to a larger narrative unfolding around them. The city felt alive yet intimate, each step revealing layers of possibility, and Sophie felt the growing awareness that she was learning not just to navigate the physical space, but to understand the careful balance of observation, presence, and trust that Lucas Sterling embodied. Then the quiet lane opened into a small park where the streetlights cast gentle pools of light across the rain-dampened benches and cobblestone paths, and Sophie followed Lucas Sterling with a mixture of caution and attentiveness, her steps synchronized with his, as they moved deeper into the intimate space. The air carried a subtle freshness, the scent of wet grass and nearby flowers blending with the faint aroma of the city beyond, creating a calm yet alert atmosphere. Lucas walked with deliberate care, scanning the park with precise attention, his movements fluid but controlled, allowing Sophie to feel a growing sense of safety while remaining aware of every detail in their surroundings. "Watch your steps and notice the light," he said softly, his voice steady, a grounding cadence that encouraged focus and presence, and Sophie adjusted her pace to follow the rhythm of his guidance. The park was quiet, the occasional rustle of leaves in a gentle breeze, and the distant murmur of city traffic forming a subtle symphony, each sound a point of reference that heightened her awareness. Lucas led her past a small fountain, its water catching the soft glow of the lamps, creating gentle reflections that danced across the wet cobblestones, and he gestured subtly for her to observe the patterns, the movement of the water forming a dynamic texture in the night. Sophie felt a sense of calm curiosity, noticing how each step and glance contributed to a developing understanding of the environment, and how Lucas's presence provided a quiet reassurance, a steady guide through the layered complexity of the city. They passed narrow paths lined with low walls and puddles reflecting scattered light, each step intentional, creating a rhythm of observation and movement that deepened Sophie's sense of engagement with the surroundings. The subtle variations in sound, light, and shadow encouraged careful attention, and she realized that she was learning to navigate not only the physical space, but the interplay of perception, patience, and trust that Lucas embodied. Pausing briefly by a cluster of trees, Lucas scanned the area, his gaze precise and measured, and Sophie felt a growing awareness of the delicate balance between movement, observation, and the unspoken guidance he provided. The gentle illumination highlighted textures and angles previously unnoticed, allowing her to absorb the layers of the night with clarity and focus. With each step through the quiet park, Sophie's understanding expanded, a growing recognition that the night was unfolding a story in which careful attention, deliberate action, and shared presence were the keys to navigating both the environment and the unspoken connections forming between them. The city beyond the park remained distant yet alive, a backdrop to their exploration, and Sophie felt the subtle exhilaration of insight and awareness, knowing that each measured movement alongside Lucas Sterling contributed to a richer understanding of the night, the space around her, and the unspoken narrative that was quietly guiding them forward toward a discovery yet to come. The cobblestone path wound gently upward as Lucas Sterling guided Sophie through a secluded area of the city, the night air crisp and carrying the faint scent of damp leaves and wet stone. The glow from street lamps scattered across the path, illuminating their steps in soft pools of light that reflected off the puddles and cast long shadows along the walls. Lucas moved with a steady confidence, his gaze sweeping each corner, every alcove, as if the city itself were alive and responsive to his awareness. "Pay attention to the space around you," he murmured, and Sophie adjusted her stride, her senses sharpening to the subtleties, the distant hum of a car, the whisper of wind through trees, the soft drip of water from the rooftops above. She felt a rhythm forming between them, each step in sync with the other, a quiet cadence that guided her focus and instilled a sense of calm alertness. The narrow streets opened into a small terrace, the rain leaving a sheen on the stone tiles, and the surrounding buildings formed a protective enclosure that muffled the distant city sounds. Lucas paused, scanning the area, and Sophie noticed the meticulous care in his movements, the way he gauged distances, shadows, and potential paths forward. Each gesture communicated patience and vigilance, inviting her to observe closely, to understand the layers of detail that defined their environment. The lanterns flickered gently, casting shifting patterns across the terrace and the nearby walls, and Sophie allowed herself to take in the textures, the angles, the subtle interplay of light and shadow, feeling the depth of the city in a way she had never before experienced. As they moved along the terrace, Lucas led her past small garden plots where flowers glistened with rain, the colors muted but rich, and the faint sound of water flowing from a small fountain added a gentle rhythm to the scene. Every movement felt deliberate, teaching Sophie the value of careful observation anticipation, and trust, while simultaneously deepening the understanding of her surroundings. Lucas's presence was a steady anchor, a calm and intentional guide through a space that demanded awareness and patience. Sophie's heartbeat matched the soft pulse of the night, her focus sharpening with each step, and she realized that the journey was as much about perception and mindfulness as it was about moving through physical space. The terrace stretched ahead, leading to narrow paths lined with low walls and glowing puddles, and Sophie felt a quiet sense of anticipation, the understanding that the night was unfolding a story in which each careful step, each attentive glance, and each measured breath was part of a larger narrative, guiding her through the city and toward discoveries that awaited just beyond the next corner. The narrow street opened into a small plaza where the lamplight reflected softly on the rain-slicked stones, and Sophie followed Lucas Sterling with careful attention, her senses alert to every subtle sound and movement. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of damp pavement and distant flowers from small planters along the edges, mixing with the faint aroma of the city beyond. Lucas moved with a calm precision, his eyes scanning every corner, every shadow, as if he could read the city like a map, his presence both grounding and reassuring. "Stay with me," he said quietly, his voice steady, and Sophie felt her heartbeat slow slightly, the tension easing as she matched the rhythm of his steps. They moved through the plaza, the reflections of light and puddles forming shifting patterns that mirrored the careful coordination of their movement. Lucas gestured subtly for her to follow a narrow path that led toward a small garden tucked between the buildings, the leaves glistening with rain and the soft glow of lanterns illuminating the space with a gentle warmth. Sophie noticed how he observed every detail, from the subtle variations in the ground beneath their feet to the way the shadows shifted along the walls, a meticulous attentiveness that invited her to trust the careful navigation he provided. They paused briefly near a small fountain, its water rippling gently in the light, and Lucas looked at her with a composed expression that suggested patience, vigilance, and an unspoken understanding. Sophie felt a sense of calm focus, the rhythm of the night aligning with the cadence of her breathing as she followed his lead, noticing the textures, patterns, and subtle movements that shaped their environment. The soft hum of distant traffic, the gentle rustle of leaves, and the occasional drip of water from rooftops created a background symphony, each sound a cue that heightened her awareness and reinforced the sense of shared presence. Lucas led her along a winding path lined with low walls and small plants, each step deliberate, creating a flow that emphasized observation, mindfulness, and the quiet interplay of movement and awareness. Sophie sensed that every gesture, every pause, and every glance carried significance, and she found herself attuned not only to the city around her, but to the presence and guidance of Lucas, understanding that their journey through the night was as much about insight and perception as it was about moving through physical space. As they continued, the plaza opened onto a small terrace where the glow of lanterns cast warm light over the wet stone, and Lucas paused, scanning the area with careful attention, then gestured for Sophie to observe the gentle interplay of reflections and shadow. The air felt alive yet intimate, each detail revealing layers of observation, trust, and shared awareness, a quiet narrative forming in the rhythm of their steps and the subtle shifts in light and sound. Sophie drew a deep breath, feeling the weight and clarity of the moment, aware that each step forward, guided by Lucas Sterling, was part of a story unfolding with deliberate care, a story that emphasized patience, perception, and the quiet formation of connection in the midst of a night alive with nuance and possibility. The night seemed to stretch around them, a canvas of light, shadow, sound, and presence, every detail contributing to the understanding that the journey was ongoing, layered, and rich with insight. And Sophie felt a growing sense of anticipation for the discoveries that lay just beyond each carefully chosen step. The city opened before them like a quiet stage, the soft glow of lampposts casting gentle light on rain-slicked streets and slick cobblestones, and Sophie followed Lucas Sterling closely, her attention keenly attuned to the subtle movements and reflections around them. The air carried the faint scent of wet pavement, flowers from nearby planters, and the distant aroma of bakery bread, mingling to create a sensory map that sharpened her focus. Lucas walked with deliberate precision, each step fluid yet intentional, his eyes scanning the surroundings with unwavering attention, noting every shadow, every flicker of movement, every nuance of light and texture. "Notice the small details," he murmured, his voice calm and steady. And Sophie adjusted her stride to match his, attuning her senses to the delicate rhythm of the night. They moved along narrow paths flanked by low walls and small gardens, puddles reflecting the soft glow of lanterns and forming fragmented images of the buildings and plants around them. Sophie became aware of how Lucas observed, anticipated, and guided without a word, each gesture a silent instruction, each pause a lesson in patience and awareness. The gentle rustle of leaves, the distant hum of traffic, the soft dripping of water from rooftops all blended into a subtle symphony that harmonized with the rhythm of their movement, anchoring her attention and fostering a sense of shared presence. At one point, they paused near a small fountain where the water shimmered and danced in fragmented light, Lucas gesturing for her to look closely, to see the patterns, the movement, the interplay of reflection and shadow. Sophie felt a quiet exhilaration, a sense that the night was revealing layers she had not perceived before, teaching her to move through space with observation, anticipation, and trust. They continued through a narrow passage lined with ivy-covered walls, the wet leaves catching the lantern light, creating a tapestry of textures and color that drew her attention to the subtle interplay of shadow, reflection, and depth. Lucas moved with a steady rhythm, his presence a stabilizing influence, guiding her steps while allowing her to engage fully with the environment, learning the nuances of perception and focus. Every step built upon the previous one, each glance and gesture fostering a growing awareness of the space, the rhythm of the city, and the careful choreography of movement and observation that connected them. Sophie sensed that this was more than a walk through hidden streets. It was an unfolding story of attention, trust, and connection, with each measured step contributing to an experience that engaged the mind, sharpened the senses, and deepened the awareness of presence. The night stretched around them, filled with soft sounds, gentle illumination, and subtle movements, creating an atmosphere where each detail mattered, and Sophie understood that the careful navigation and shared focus were crafting a narrative that intertwined observation, trust, and the quiet formation of understanding, guiding her deeper into the layered, intimate story of the city and of Lucas Sterling's steady, deliberate influence in the night. The narrow terrace opened onto a small plaza where the soft glow of lanterns painted gentle light over the rain-washed stones, and Sophie followed Lucas Sterling with a measured attentiveness, her senses alert to the subtle shifts of shadow and reflection around them. The air was cool and carried a faint fragrance of wet foliage and distant baked bread, blending with the natural scent of the night and creating a space that felt intimate and alive. Lucas moved with deliberate grace, his eyes sweeping the surroundings with careful precision, each gesture and pause purposeful, guiding Sophie through the layered paths with quiet assurance. "Focus on the details," he murmured, and Sophie adjusted her pace, attuning her awareness to the nuanced patterns of light, the subtle movement of leaves in a gentle breeze, and the reflective surfaces of puddles forming intricate shapes on the cobblestones. The city beyond the plaza hummed softly, distant traffic and the occasional echo of footsteps blending into a background rhythm that harmonized with the careful cadence of their movement. Lucas paused near a small fountain, the water rippling with gentle luminosity, and gestured for Sophie to observe the interplay of reflection and shadow, encouraging a mindful engagement with the space. She felt a growing sense of calm focus, realizing that each step and observation was a lesson in patience, perception, and trust, her attention sharpening to both the environment and the presence of Lucas beside her. They moved along narrow lanes framed by low walls and lantern-lit foliage, puddles catching fragmented light and creating patterns that shifted with each step, reinforcing the intricate choreography of movement, observation, and understanding. Every pause, glance, and subtle gesture between them deepened Sophie's awareness, the night forming a rich tapestry where each detail held significance and each moment of shared presence strengthened the unspoken connection. The faint murmur of distant voices, the rustle of leaves in the breeze, and the delicate dripping of water from nearby rooftops created a layered auditory landscape, punctuating the visual rhythm of reflections, textures, and soft illumination. Lucas's steady guidance provided a grounding presence, offering a subtle structure that allowed Sophie to navigate the evolving narrative of the city with clarity and mindfulness. Each step forward revealed further nuances in light, shadow, and texture, shaping an understanding of space and presence that was at once practical and meditative. The terrace and surrounding alleyways unfolded as a carefully observed environment, revealing hidden corners and subtle movements, each observation fostering a deeper engagement with both the physical space and the quiet, attentive bond forming between them. Sophie drew a measured breath, feeling the alignment of rhythm, light, and awareness, and she sensed that this journey, unfolding in quiet observation and deliberate steps, was shaping a narrative of presence, trust, and the gradual unveiling of the city and its layered stories, promising discovery, insight, and a growing understanding of Lucas Sterling's composed and thoughtful guidance in the night. The moon hung low over the rooftops, casting long silver shadows across the narrow alleys, and Sophie followed Lucas Sterling with careful steps, her eyes absorbing the intricate patterns of light and shadow that danced across the wet cobblestones. The air was crisp and carried the faint scent of rain, earth, and distant flowers, mingling with the urban aroma of the city beyond, creating a sensory map that sharpened her awareness and heightened her focus. Lucas moved with precise, deliberate grace, each step measured, his gaze sweeping the surroundings with acute attention to detail, noting every subtle shift in shadow, every reflection in puddles, every corner where light and darkness met. "Watch the nuances," he whispered, and Sophie adjusted her stride, tuning into the rhythm of the city and the cadence of his movements. They navigated through narrow passageways, the walls slick from the rain, the faint glimmer of lanterns illuminating the way, casting soft, distorted reflections that shifted with each careful step. Sophie noticed how Lucas observed the environment, not just physically, but with an intuitive awareness, guiding her through the complex maze of streets with patience and quiet authority. The distant hum of traffic and occasional footsteps created a gentle soundtrack to their movement, a background rhythm that harmonized with the soft drip of water from rooftops and the rustle of leaves overhead. Lucas paused briefly at a small courtyard, the water from a fountain catching the lantern light, forming shimmering patterns that reflected their movements and the subtle textures of the surrounding buildings. He gestured for Sophie to observe the delicate interplay of light, shadow, and movement, and she felt a sense of calm attentiveness, recognizing the careful layering of observation, trust, and presence that defined their progress through the night. Each narrow alleyway revealed new textures, patterns, and angles, deepening Sophie's awareness of the city and the subtle signals Lucas provided, the unspoken communication between them growing more intuitive with each step. The gentle sway of plants in the breeze, the faint echo of distant voices, and the soft glimmer of reflections in puddles created a tapestry of sensory details that demanded focus, and Sophie found herself fully engaged in both the environment and the rhythm of movement dictated by Lucas's lead. They continued along a winding terrace lined with low walls, the soft illumination highlighting textures and surfaces previously unnoticed, each detail contributing to the shared understanding of space, movement, and attentive perception. Lucas's presence provided a stabilizing force, a quiet assurance that allowed Sophie to engage with her surroundings while learning the subtle cues and careful navigation that shaped the unfolding experience. With each step, the night revealed layers of the city, textures, and shadows that intertwined with the deliberate pacing of their journey, reinforcing the quiet trust, observation, and mindfulness that guided them. Sophie's awareness expanded with every carefully chosen movement, the soft glow of light reflecting in puddles, the gentle rustle of leaves, and the distant murmur of the city creating a harmonious environment in which each moment of shared presence contributed to a deeper understanding, a slow revelation of the layers, textures, and careful choreography that defined Lucas Sterling's guidance through the night and the quiet, unfolding story that was leading them toward an experience of insight, attentiveness, and subtle connection. The final stretch of the alley opened into a quiet plaza, the soft glow of lanterns casting long, gentle shadows across the rain-slicked cobblestones, and Sophie followed Lucas Sterling with careful attention, her senses tuned to the delicate interplay of light, shadow, and reflection around them. The air was crisp and carried faint hints of wet earth, distant flowers, and the soft aroma of the city beyond, creating a layered backdrop that heightened awareness and grounded each step. Lucas moved with deliberate intent, each footfall measured and precise, his gaze sweeping the plaza, noting every angle, reflection, and subtle detail, guiding Sophie through the space with a calm authority that invited trust without commanding it. "Focus and observe," he murmured, his voice a steady cadence that encouraged mindfulness, and Sophie adjusted her pace, allowing her attention to align with the rhythm of the night and the deliberate movements of Lucas. They moved past low walls, puddles reflecting scattered lantern light, and small garden plots where raindrops clung to leaves, catching the illumination in tiny, shimmering points. Sophie noticed the care in each gesture, each pause, the way Lucas guided her attention without forcing it, teaching her to perceive and navigate the environment with intention and awareness. The subtle sounds of the night, the rustle of leaves, distant footsteps, the soft hum of traffic, formed a layered symphony that synchronized with the reflective patterns of light and shadow, reinforcing the shared focus and sense of presence. Lucas paused near a corner where the alley opened onto a narrow bridge, water reflecting the lamps below in fragmented, shifting patterns, and gestured subtly for Sophie to observe the reflections, the textures of stone and water, the movement of light across surfaces. She felt a calm anticipation, a deepened awareness of the surroundings, and a connection to the careful, deliberate guidance that had shaped each step of the journey. The terrace beyond the bridge revealed a series of subtle paths and small alcoves, each detail inviting careful observation, reinforcing the rhythm of mindful movement and shared presence. With every step, the narrative of the night expanded, each element, light, shadow, texture, reflection, and sound, woven into a cohesive experience that Sophie could feel both physically and mentally, each observation reinforcing the understanding of space and the subtle communication between her and Lucas. The soft illumination, gentle echoes, and delicate textures of the plaza and surrounding alleys created a final layer of perception, the culmination of attentive observation, trust, and the quiet awareness of the night. Sophie drew a slow breath, sensing the city's layered complexity, the calm authority of Lucas Sterling, and the delicate interplay of light, shadow, and reflection, recognizing that each step had built toward a deeper understanding, and that the story of the night, shaped by observation, presence, and trust, would continue beyond this moment, leaving a quiet,